A very warm welcome to this panel on global perspectives on tackling greenwashing in ads. My name's Guy Parker. I'm the Chief Exec of the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK. I'm also honoured to be President of ICAS. ICAS is the International Council for Ad Self-Regulation. And I'm delighted to introduce fellow ICAS members. First of all, Mary Engle. Mary is Executive Vice President for Policy at BBB National Programs in the US. Newman Debs. Newman is General Counsel Latin America for Unilever. He'll be talking to us today on behalf of the Brazilian ad self-regulatory body, CONAR, but he's actually joining us today from Uruguay. So welcome, Newman. And last but not least, Stephane Martin, who is the Managing Director of ARPP, the French ad self-regulatory body. Welcome, Stephane. So we're going to be talking to you today about greenwashing in ads. We're going to be covering off the European, the North American, and the South American perspectives. And without further ado, I'm going to ask my first question to Mary. So Mary, could you tell us a bit about the state of play around environmental claims in the United States at the moment, and the role that the NAD, the US ad self-regulatory body, the role that the NAD currently plays in making sure they're responsible?
Sure. So the U.S. government regulator for advertising is the Federal Trade Commission, and the FTC has actually issued guides for the use of environmental marketing claims. They issued them back in 1992. I actually worked on them when I was there way back in the day. And the FTC has updated the guides most recently in 2012 and is scheduled to do so again 10 years later in 2022. So it's got these environmental marketing guides on the books and has brought some cases over the years, although it really hasn't been very active in the last few years on green claims. And other than, though, with a landmark exception, which was about 5 years ago, the commission settled the case against Volkswagen involving the infamous Dieselgate emissions testing fraud. And in that case, the commission was able to get a settlement for nearly $10 billion in restitution to consumers. But even though the FTC hasn't been particularly active in bringing green cases lately, there's still a lot of interest among American consumers in the environment in green advertising claims. And especially in the last few years, we've seen an uptick in claims relating to climate change and sustainability. And with the government not acting, it's been the perfect opportunity for self-regulation to step into place. And in fact, the National Advertising Division, or NAD, has brought 40 to 50 cases involving environmental claims over the years. And in the last few years, we've seen an uptick in cases. At the NAD, advertisers can challenge one another's advertising for being misleading. And we also open cases on our own initiative based on our own review of the marketplace. And so we're seeing both of those going on right now.
And are you seeing any patterns of issue that you're coming across in your work on this?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is claims being made without sort of sufficient specificity. So you'll see a general claim of sustainability without really an explanation of why it's sustainable. More carbon-related claims, which the FTC has issued some guidance on. And so in addition to the general, more specific claims of like recyclability that have always been very popular.
Thank you, Mary. And Newman, just sticking with the Americas, is this a growing issue in Brazil too? And how is CONAR responding to the challenge?
Well, thanks for the question, Guy. First of all, I would like to highlight that within the country, one realizes clearly that the majority of the Brazilian people, the civil society and the private sector, have a clear position for caring and respecting our ecosystem. And although it may trigger some skepticism, the presentation of environmental claims in advertising is fundamental, we believe, as they can be considered part of the effective measures to care for the ecosystem. So the ad self-regulatory entity in Brazil, the CONAR, has a long history in providing and implementing rules in order to provide the correct communication of the environmental measures. Some specific new claims are emerging, i.e. they're related to carbon footprint, as mentioned by Mary as well. So we know that their analysis demand a huge amount of technical data and posing a higher challenge at the compliance steps. So therefore, this requires a joint effort to gather relevant information to better understand the support of the claims, always based obviously on solid scientific evidence. So the green claims are certainly one of the areas where permanent monitoring by CONAR happens. And besides that, what we have seen recently is an increase in the numbers of consumer scrutiny, the number of complaints presented by consumers. What we consider as positive, as it shows an increase in the awareness and also as it raises the accountability needed from advertisers.
And is there much interplay between CONAR as the ad self-regulatory body in Brazil and any Brazilian government department? I mean, we've heard from Mary about the FTC guide, which they're going to be updating next year. Is there an equivalent in Brazil?
Actually, there is, Guy. The Consumer Defense Department, which is an organism linked to the Ministry of Justice, has a work linked to CONAR or jointly with CONAR to understand this scenario and to better rule the framework.
That's interesting. And we heard from Mary that although the FTC hasn't been that active, with the exception of that 10 billion settlement on the VW case, how active has the Brazilian government been on this? Or is there a good space for ad self-regulation to operate and make sure that green claims are the right side of the line?
Well, Guy, self-regulation is so traditional in the country that the consumers and the players, the companies, are very used to present challenges to the ads. So that's really where the most of this discussion has been happening, and obviously we welcome any developments in the official arena as well. But this doesn't impact on the work that the CONAR is doing.
That's interesting. So that's two perspectives here from the United States and Brazil, where there's, I think, quite good evidence of the government and the ad self-regulatory body complementing each other in the role that they're playing to try and make sure that greenwashing doesn't happen. How about France, Stephane? The Citizens Convention for Climate has attracted significant attention in the last couple of years. I think many people see France as being at the forefront of climate-related policy making. I'm interested in how that's influenced the debate around advertising in France, and obviously the current work of ARPP.
Indeed, and the Citizens Convention on Climate brings together 150 citizens presented as drawn at random from the French population. It had for mandate of the French president to define structuring measures to achieve a reduction in greenhouse gas emission of at least 40% by 2030 compared to 1990 in a spirit of a social justice. Let's call ourselves that. It was a form of response to the Yellow Vest movement we had in France 3 years ago, which was born out of a resistance to an increase in the price of automobile fuel, resulting from the rise of the domestic consumption tax on energy products to finance the energy transition. This is a sensitive issue for all countries, as we can see during the COP26, this financing, how we can finance and who will pay this transition. The measures previously required of these citizens went far beyond commercial communications, but among the experts interviewed, a French IPC co-chair of a working group pointed out the advertising and our responsibility for the causes of climate change. So the last 2 years have therefore been punctuated by the adoption of French laws on mobilities, on circular economy, on anti-waste, and this August on climate and resilience. So without going into much details of this legal text, which have and will have an impact of the lives of French people as well as businesses, it is intended to be a positive step towards meeting the commitments of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN and, of course, of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the 2015. So its policy action of this set of laws is to use brand communication to add a positive injection in the ads. But also, the second political axis is the bans or restrictions of some environmental claims, like carbon neutral, for example, or some advertising relating to the marketing or promotion of fossil fuels applicable from next August. So the pursued political objective is to strongly influence consumption and lifestyles, and advertising has its roles to play, which we absolutely do not deny, since the first self-regulation rules on greenwashing, for example, as in the UK, date back some 30 years and cover since the year 2000 the sustainable development in general. And the fifth version of our code date from 2020. So this is what the industry, united within the self-regulation, wish to recall and reinforce by making robust, serious and measured commitments set out on the climate contract, it is called like that in the law, and a report that the ARPP will present to the Parliament each year. The climate law has enshrined this, joining in spirit the co-regulation provided by the European directives, like the EVMSD. So these commitments are aimed to strengthen on the consultation with the civil society, with the fourth college of associations integrated in our ARPP board of directors, alongside brands, agencies, and media. Also to increase the efficiency of our jury in urgent cases, for example, mostly greenwashing cases, and for our daily work to reinforce the control of the main national campaigns, including a non-environmental claim, by strong commitments of brands and agencies to seek prior copy advice across all media, because as you know, we already do the TV precurrence like Clearcast in the UK, in France.
Thank you, Stephane. So I'm really interested in what you said earlier about the ban on carbon neutral presumably in claims in ads. As I understand it, there are very strong restrictions coming in around that term, and you have to verify with 3 pieces of information if you are making that claim, and if you don't or you can't, then the claim carbon neutral is banned. Can you tell us a little bit more about that verification that needs to take place or will need to take place when this decree comes in?
Yeah, exactly. To use this kind of very strong phrase, strong claim from a brand and mostly from a company, in fact, because for a product, it's quite difficult to be only carbon neutral. So this is a commitment from the company. They will have to show on their website, for example, but with a mention in the ads, please do follow this information, that they have to respect, of course, what all the steps and the cumulative steps they will have to prove to be really carbon neutral. So it could be very few companies that could be able to use and still use this carbon neutral and, of course, things around the same meaning of carbon neutral.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Just from a UK perspective, we in the UK have got very demanding and legally backed carbon reduction targets, 78% cut by 2035, net zero by 2050. And expert bodies like the UK Climate Change Committee have been very clear that we'll only meet those targets if there's wide-scale consumer behaviour change. In other words, these targets are not going to be met just by changing the energy grid, important though that is. And an important part of the journey that we're on in the UK is that greenwashing is going to have to be tackled. Similar to some of the other perspectives that we've heard, there is a statutory regulator in the UK, the Competition and Markets Authority, that is becoming more active. It has just produced guidance on green claims. It's going to be checking in on whether companies are meeting that guidance. That guidance covers a bit more than advertising, but it covers advertising too. We at the ASA have been regulating green claims in ads for decades. I think the environmental rules in our codes came into force in the late 80s and maybe the early 90s. I was trying to find out the other day, but I couldn't quite get to the date. And we're all about making sure that ads are legal, decent, honest and truthful, and that applies particularly to environmental claims. We worked closely with the CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority, on their guidance. We believe that between us, we are going to be presenting a consistent and a united front on this. And in common with others, the sort of issues that we have come across in the last few decades, and we come across today, and we will come across in the coming years, are around specificity, the point that Mary made, not making clear the basis of the environmental claim. And an easy trap to fall into is to use overly absolute claims. This product is green, rather than explaining that it is greener and explaining why it is greener and being able to prove that. Very often when there is a problem, it's because the advertiser has not taken into account the full life cycle of the product, which is sometimes but not always important, depending on how specific the claim is. And there have been plenty of occasions, and I'm sure there will be occasions in the future, where businesses have fallen foul of the code because their substantiation has not been good enough. And this really is an area where, if you are wanting to make an environmental claim, you really must double down on your evidence. You've got to make sure your evidence is watertight. And a piece of advice that I give to companies who are going down this road is to really put yourself in the shoes of a critic of your business, a campaigner, and try and imagine what case they would make against your claim, and then make sure you can defend it against those arguments, because you probably will need to. I think so far so consistent when it comes to the various approaches that we've been talking about. I want to ask another question to Mary. I was going to ask whether the US government has provided guidance on sustainability claims, but you've already told me that there is FTC guidance and it's about to be updated. So I'm keen in exploring.
Although not on sustainability claims specifically. The guidance that the FTC has issued did not cover sustainability claims.
Oh, is that something that you think they might bring out, or is this an opportunity for advertising self-regulation to fill the gap?
Well, both, actually, I think. So when the FTC updated its guides in 2012, it actually considered offering guidance on sustainability claims. But it looked at some consumer research on how consumers interpret the claim, and really found that consumers were all over the map. They didn't really know what it meant, or they thought it meant a whole lot of different things. Or maybe it just looked like kind of a general environmental benefit claim. So at that time, the FTC declined to offer specific guidance on sustainable claims, other than to kind of say, be cautious with them. So in the meantime, and I do imagine that, given, passage of time and the increased use of the claim, that the FTC will offer guidance probably when they revise the guides. But in the meantime, it has been an opportunity for self-regulation to fill in the gap. Absolutely. The NAD has brought several cases involving sustainability claims very recently, in fact. And if time permits, I could describe one or two of those.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. Please do.
Yeah. Okay, so like the most recent case involved a toilet tissue company, and they claimed on their package that they were comfort, it was a sustainable comfort, something like that. Our promise, sustainable comfort. And when the NAD looked at that, we said, well, what does that mean? Sustainable, sustainably made. And it turned out that they had more details about what that claim meant, what they intended to mean by that claim on their website and also on the back of the package. And they added some details there about they were planting trees, they were energy efficient, but the front package of the just said, now I've got the quote, our eco comfort promise, premium comfort made sustainably. And so the NAD found that was not sufficiently, it needed a qualification when it appeared on the front. And so we recommended that they either discontinue the claim or add the qualification in close conjunction, like how this is sustainable, whether, it's the tree planting or the energy efficiency. And actually, another aspect of this case that I think is really interesting was that they made an aspirational claim. They said that our plan is to plant 2 million new trees by the end of 2021. And so, and I think, you do see a lot of these aspirational claims in the green areas, especially with the carbon reductions and the like. And when we looked at that and asked them for their substantiation, we were satisfied that they did have a plan and they had started implementing the plan for how they were going to plant those 2 million trees. So we were good with that.
Yeah, and that's the thing with these sorts of claims that are forward-looking. They obviously can't prove they've done it because they haven't had the chance to do it yet. So it is really all about whether they've got a good plan in place and they seem committed to meeting that aspiration. Newman, over to you. Are there any plans for CONAR to develop the self-regulatory framework in Brazil when it comes to green claims? And but also I'm interested in more general environmental related messages in ads.
All right. Well, since the initial version of the Brazilian self-regulatory code, Guy, in 1978, it has regulated environmental claims on a sort of broad sense. The code was updated 10 years ago in 2011 with the creation of a dedicated chapter providing more detailed rules to environmental claims. These rules were drafted by a multidisciplinary group at the occasion, with the participation of the advertising and agencies representatives, and it was coordinated by an academic who at the time was director of UNCTAD and Greenpeace, and a researcher at the Consumer International, so ensuring that it took into account the many international standards to this new chapter. Now, having said all that, although the current CONAR Brazil framework doesn't have yet specific rules regarding, for example, climate change or some frequent specific claims, it has the general principles of truthful, substantiation, accuracy, clarity, relevance. The sources need to exist and to be displayed, accountability, etc. So basically, the claims need to be transparent and based on sound science. Hence, advertisers need to be able to demonstrate, whenever needed, their green credentials and help consumers navigate the complexity on green claims in a way that is consumer relevant. So we believe that comms, in its broadest sense, needs to be exploited beyond on-pack claims, plus partnerships with NGOs and transparent explanations on what advertisers mean when they talk about impact reduction and waste, and when they show progress. So if one was to think about an advice to the advertisers, I think besides stepping into the shoes of the authority as you propose it, I would also think of stepping in the shoes of the consumer, to try to imagine how the consumer is going to understand the message, the promise. We know that this is complex, and all the effort that the advertisers can do in order to make it transparent and understandable, the better. So these principles have been used to ground several advertising analyses Obviously, we are aware that the issue requires constant improvement. And we, as the SRO, we are open to the framework update and to the implementation of steps advanced. Yeah.
Two really important points that I want to just highlight. First of all, drawing in environmental expertise in making sure the framework is right, which you did in Brazil, but also this crucial issue of, what do people think? What do they understand? What are they inferring from claims in ads? What are they understanding? What are they not understanding? What are they finding confusing? Two really important points. Stephane, you talked about the climate contract, and is it annual reporting that ARPP will do to the French Parliament? Obviously, that's forward-looking. But how else do you see ARPP's role evolving when it comes to green claims, environmental related messages more broadly in ads, because it's not just about misleadingness? How else do you see ARPP's role evolving in the coming years?
Right. Yes, Guy. This is the will of the actors themselves. In fact, our members to get involved and the ARP and more, in fact. So we can already see this in the growing number we have of requests for support, first through training of company teams, for example, through copy advice before broadcasting, and also through the educational work we do after the broadcasting, after the distribution, including with this new release of brands for consumers, the influencers. So by the rule, but the rule regarding the environment is not simple, like Newman said. It's true, because also the perception of a possible greenwashing is obviously not shared by the same people at the same time and by the same way. So some project into advertising the questioning of the economic model of the society even, or of certain sectors and company, and not only ads. So the role of ad self-regulation for us is precisely to succeed after a broad overview, including multiple stakeholders, in establishing a commonly shared rule, which is a consensus at a given time, and which will be changed regularly, as you know. So for advertising, beyond its role, in which I firmly believe, of support by its very function of transforming uses and consumption, I'm sure, which saw, for example, the ads for electric and rechargeable hybrid models for the cars. There are more ads than the real market share for now. But it is also the degree of the proportionality in the allegation that is expected. So no, like we all said, the product, no service or product save the planet or clean the oceans. But certainly, given their processing, their mode of production, they can contribute to. So this is what we are working every day for making a better art. So the art is essential to train these professionals and raise the industry awareness so that the advertising is and should have beyond reproach.
Yeah, so a big focus on preventing problems upstream rather than having to deal with them further downstream, which is always a good thing. Prevention is better than cure, right? Just a minute or two from me on the more forward-looking stuff from a UK perspective. We launched last year a climate change in the environment project. We're starting by focusing on high priority areas like transport, energy, and heating. I'm glad you mentioned claims for hybrid electric vehicles, Stephane, because that's one area that we're going to be exploring. That's not just focused on exploring misleading green claims, important though that will continue to be. We're also looking into irresponsible environmental messages in ads. We're already seeing increased pressure on advertising for its role in encouraging unsustainable consumption. That's only going to increase. If consumer behavior change is needed to meet carbon reduction targets, then I think we should be asking ourselves what norms of today will have to change, and what is advertising and advertising regulations' role in helping to deliver that change. It's pretty inconceivable to me that we won't be looking back in 10 years' time and asking ourselves how we can have allowed certain environmental messaging to go unchallenged. And we want to be proactive and on the front foot, asking ourselves now, not in 5 or 10 years' time, what norms of today might be taboos of the future, so that we can begin to tackle them today. And the climate change project that we are running is a really important part of that. We've run out of time. I was gonna. I've got so many more questions that I'd love to ask Mary, Newman, and Stephane, but I do want to thank them very much for joining me on this panel. Thank you to AdNet Zero for having us. I hope you found these global perspectives on greenwashing in ads interesting and useful, and enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you.